Hello everyone, welcome back to Edubbey Global Solution. Today we'll be discussing economic growth. What do we mean by economic growth? Let us go to our slide. Now, first slide, we have the definition of economic growth, and we also have one or two past questions here. Now, what do we mean by economic growth? Economic growth is an increase in the amount of goods and services produced per head of the production over a period of time, and at the same time the total value of output of goods and service produced is known as what? It's known as national output. Now, what is our past question here? What is identified as economic growth? According to our definition that says it is the increase in the amount of goods and service, that is the production capacity of a country at a point in time. Now, what should be the answer here? Is it the economic entire period of no, a fall in the labor productivities? No. An increase in the productive capacity or an increase in the consumer price? And of course, the correct answer is an increase in the productive capacity of the economy. The second past question is also related to the definition of economic growth, that is, which is an increase in the country productive capacity or an increase in the country's population, an increase in the country's export, or a reduction in the country's rate of inflation. Of course, this is also the same thing as the first question we have treated, an increase in the country's productive capacity. Now let us move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the measurement of what? Of an economic growth. How do we measure economic growth, and what measure do we use? Now we have the gross domestic product as what? GDP. It is the total market value of all final goods and services provided within an economy. And at the same time, we have our gross domestic product to be classified into what? Nominal GDP and the real GDP. Our nominal GDP is now the value of output produced in an economic in a point in time, while our real GDP is an what? Is a inflation adjusted measure that reflects the value of all goods and services produced by an economy given in a year. Now note this, we have the nominal GDP to record the value of output produced in an economy in the period of time, while real GDP reflects the value of all goods produced in an economy in a year. And we have our GDP per capita or per head to measure the average output or income per person in an economy, which is calculated by dividing the real GDP, that is the real gross domestic product, by what? By the population of country. Now we move to the next slide. We now have the causes of what? We have the causes of economic growth, and we also have past question here beside it. Now let us check the first point: investing in new capital and infrastructure. How does it cause an economic growth? Of course, when there is investing in new machineries, buildings, and so on, that leads us to an economic growth. Of course, we also have discovery of more natural resources. That is when we discover more production capacity. It also leads to an increase in economic growth, and also an increase in the quality and quantity of factor of production. Of course, a larger and productive workforce will also increase gross domestic product, and we also have the reallocation resources. Moving resources from less productive use to more productive use can also lead to an economic growth, and also decreases in tax rate. Producer will be able to produce more goods and services. Now let us check our past question here. What is the likely cause of an economic growth? According to our explanation here, let us check our options out. We have decreased productivities, decrease in taxation, decrease investment, decrease employment. What do you think can be the cause of economic growth here? Of course, we have treated it. We have the decreased taxation. Now we have the second question here, also related to the causes of economic growth. What may directly cause economic growth? What do you think can cause economic growth here? Higher unemployment, higher import, higher taxation, higher level of resources. Of course, the correct answer here is higher level. What is sorry for that is the what higher level of resources. I took that answer intentionally. Now let us retry it. We have decreased in production. Of course, decreased taxation here we have treated is the first answer is decrease in taxation. Why the second one is what? Because higher level of resources can cause economic growth, not higher import. Now let us move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the consequences of economic growth. What are the effects of what? Of an economic growth. Now let us pick this thing out. Of course, we have natural resources may get depleted over time. Of course, technical progress causes can also cause a rise in unemployment when there is economic growth. Of course, it can also increase negative externalities like pollutions. Now we also have falling income. Does economic growth cause fall in income? Of course, no. Economic growth may also cause an inflation. Now let us check. We got it right. Now let us move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the benefit of economic growth and how an economic growth is shown on a PPV curve. Remember our PPC production possibility curve or frontiers. Now for our benefit of economic growth, it will lead to greater availability of goods and services, and it also leads to an increased employment opportunity and income, and also improve standard of living. Now let us move to the next slide. Move to the next slide. We have one past question here. Why does more emphasis on education and training lead to an increase in national output? Now let us check these options out. It lower the input of capital investment to reduce demand for higher pay. It improves the productivity of the labor force. It reduces the power of trade union. Of course, it improves the productivity of the labor force. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the policies to promote economic growth. What are the policies we use to promote an economic growth? A government may use an expansionary fiscal and monetary policy, which are demand side policy and supply side policy to promote an economic growth. How do we mean? Of course, we have treated this expansionary fiscal and monetary policy. That is when government reduce when government reduce what our taxes in fiscal policy and reduce the interest rate in our monetary policy. And also we have supply side policy also. Now what are the effectiveness of short policy? Of course, demand side policy that increase the rate of growth can cause inflation if it is not controlled, and at the same time supply side policy can also take considerable time to take effect. Now we move to the next slide. Move to the next slide. We still have one past question here. The government wishes to increase economic growth in its economy. What would not be likely to achieve this aim? Now the option says the government subsidize new industry, the government increases tax, the central bank encourage bank lending, or the central bank lower interest rate. What will not be the likely to achieve this aim? Of course, what that likely not to have achieved this aim is when government increase the sales tax, that is the tax on goods and services. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have what is known as recession. What are the causes of recession and what is the meaning of recession itself? Now we have recession to be defined as the reduction in the real gross domestic product over a period of 6 months or more. The period is also known as two successive quarters. Now what are the causes of recession? What are the causes of a reduction in real gross domestic product? Now let us pick what can be the causes of recession here. Now the first one we have increased employment. Can an increase in employment cause precision? No. And without reallocating resources? Of course, no. But we have fall in consumer business and confidence. Of course, fall in consumer business and confidence can reduce both supply and demand. Now we have the financial crisis. Of course, when there's a shortage of liquidity, bank also reduce what? And when they reduce lending, of course, it will also reduce the demand. And we have the rise in interest rate. Of course, increases in the cost of borrowing also reduce what? Reduce demand. Now we also have the fall in real wages. Of course, reduction in wages in line with inflation we also call deflation. Now we have the cutting government spending. Of course, when government cuts spending, demand will also fall. Those are the causes of recession. Now let us check. We are good to go. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we also have one past question here. What may cause a recession? We have just done that earlier. Now, an increase in investment, is that so? An increase in consumer spending, an increase in government spending, or an increase in import? Of course, an increase in import should be the causes of recession here. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we now have the consequences of recession. What are the effects of recession here? Now, first, firms go out of business. Of course, most firms will go out of business, and it also leads to an unemployment, at the same time fall in income, and also higher budget deficit. That is, the imports will be more than export, and we also have the permanently loss of output. Now here we show the consequences of recession on what? On a PPC. It shows that the consumer goods move inside, that is inward, to B when there is a recession. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we have past question. Which change affecting an economic's labor market promotes economic growth? Now I like this question. Which change affecting an economic's labor market also promotes economic growth? Reducing training of workers, is that so? Increasing trade union strike action, lowering the age of retirement, or removing immigration control? Of course, it is removing immigration control. Moving to the next slide, we also have one or two past questions here. Which economic situation exists where there are two consecutive quarters, that is 6 months of negative economic growth? What does that mean? We mean what? Recession, according to our definition of recession. Now we have the option here to be recession, current account deficit, inflation, or budget surplus. Of course, our answer is recession. Now the next question is also talking about what? Let us check. What is defined as a reduction in the gross domestic product for more than 2 successive quarters? This is a straightforward question for the definition of a recession. Now let us check out the options here. We have deflation, is that so? Recession, falling wages, or rising unemployment? Of course, the correct answer is what? Recession. Now we move to the next slide. Moving to the next slide, we also have past question here. In recent years, some low-income countries have achieved higher rate of economic growth than high-income countries rather. What is most likely to explain this as elevated economic growth? Now let us check our options out. Increased trade barrier by high-income countries, higher ratios of labor to capital in manufacturing industry, falling industry prices, ease of transfer of modern technology to increase productivity. Of course, we have known our answer here when they say in recent years some low-income countries have achieved higher rate of economic growth than high-income country. Now what should be the explanation of this economic growth? It is the ease of transfer of modern technology to increase economic growth. This will be the end of our class. Stay tuned to our website www.edubbey.com. Thanks for listening.